Hi, welcome everyone. I will begin, but I need to address the French speakers first, and then we will begin. Alors, salut aux participants francophones. Malheureusement, la personne qui va faire l'interprétation n'est arrivée. J'espère qu'elle va arriver dans les prochaines minutes, mais au cause des temps, on doit commencer en anglais. Une fois que la personne arrive et que l'interprétation commence, je vais écrire sur le chat que l'interprétation est disponible, d'accord? Mais pour le moment, on va écouter la séance simplement en anglais. Une autre fois, une fois que la personne arrive, je vais communiquer à tout le monde dans le chat que le service d'interprétation est disponible, d'accord? Je suis désolée pour ça. Maintenant, en anglais, je vais commencer. And I apologize as well in English for those who were waiting for the French interpretation. I am sure she will join pretty soon. Um, Welcome back to our third session of the Leadership in Practice webinar series. Over the past two webinars, we've explored community engagement and active listening. Today, we'll focus on navigating difficult conversations, a skill every leader needs when working with colleagues, community members, patients, families, and partners. We're so grateful to once again have Elise Verduner leading today's discussion and sharing practical strategies drawn from her extensive experience working with communities and organizations around the world. As always, we invite you to please use the chat to introduce yourself if you're new, to ask any questions that you may have, or to share any experiences that you want to share. We will answer as many questions as possible during today's webinar and follow up afterwards if needed. I will also, today at the end of the event, when I share the recap, share with you some extra resources from our second event as well. So be on the lookout for that. Elise, thank you again for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. I will share my screen. Send a request. Awesome. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen. Awesome, great. Okay, I will pull up the chat so I can see all of your introductions and questions. So welcome back. It is great to be here with you all again in our third session. Last week, as Esther mentioned, we talked about active listening. And today, we will really put those skills to the test with our discussion of navigating difficult conversations. But before we get there, we will return briefly to our discussion of communication across cultural differences. This will actually set us up really well to understand difficult conversations, as this is sometimes the root of conflict. Then from there, we will unpack what do we mean when we say a conversation is difficult. I'll introduce 3 different scenarios that will carry us through the session before we move into talking about conflict resolution basics, de-escalation techniques, and what to do when those emotions are running really high. We'll close by discussing how to manage your own emotions in these moments and not only the other person's. So we have a lot to cover today, and as always, please share your experiences, reflections, any questions in the chat as we go along. But to start us off, we'll return briefly to our communication toolbox. Everything we covered in last session, the active listening, reflecting, clarifying, asking questions, all of this happens in context. And that context is always shaped by culture. Culture is that shared set of values, beliefs, and ways of communicating that shape how we see the world and how we relate to others. It shapes who is allowed to talk, how much you feel like you can say, where you look, maybe what you do with your hands, or how you express emotions. And then cultural awareness is just noticing these differences. We're not assuming what they mean, but simply noticing. Maybe you observe someone avoids eye contact, but what that actually means really depends on who the person is and where they come from. Culture is something we often take for granted in the sense that it's there in the background. So it's when we are communicating across these differences and no longer have that shared set of norms that we experience all sorts of different, sometimes awkward, sometimes challenging interactions. And this is because the expectations around communicating are just different. So let's look at some examples. We'll start with eye contact. In some cultures, direct eye contact signals attentiveness and trust, whereas in others, maybe avoiding eye contact shows respect, particularly towards elders or authority figures, as I think some of you mentioned in the chat last week. Neither is right or wrong, it's just different. Next, silence. Some cultures treat silence as uncomfortable and fill it quickly. Others see pauses as necessary space for reflection and processing. If you interrupt or talk over someone, sometimes is that seen as maybe a normal part of the conversation, or sometimes it might be seen as being rude. So what are the norms that are related to interrupting or how we use silence in a conversation? This also connects well to hierarchy and the order of who gets to speak. So maybe sometimes somebody that is being silent, maybe they don't feel like they have permission to speak or it is their turn to speak. So recognizing those moments of difference. Next, physical distance and volume. What feels like an appropriate distance or a normal volume of voice varies widely. What might read as enthusiastic in one context may feel aggressive in another. And lastly, idiomatic expressions. These are the phrases that feel natural in one language, but might not translate literally or culturally. To give you an example, the phrase break the ice in English means to say or do something to make others feel comfortable at the start of a conversation or a meeting. This phrase, break the ice, may not directly translate into other languages. So when in doubt, try to use plain language. This will help ensure that you have that shared understanding. But really, the key here is curiosity. So when those communication norms differ, active listening becomes even more important. So be ready to ask clarifying questions, mirror their communication style, and then actively look to build understanding and that shared understanding, rather than assuming that your way is the right way or the default. So essentially, use the skills from our communication toolbox that we discussed last week. So now I want you to think of a time when a conversation felt challenging because you and the other person had different ways of communicating. What did you notice? Feel free to write in the chat or come on mic. So I'll ask one more time, thinking of a time that a conversation felt challenging because you and the other person had different ways of communicating. What did you notice? Okay, frustration. Yeah. Silence. Yeah, a feeling of tenseness. Yeah. Avoiding eye contact. hmm Agitation. Yeah. I felt uncomfortable to continue the conversation. Yeah, so sometimes it might shut down the conversation when things get uncomfortable. Yeah. Confused. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for sharing these. Feeling belittled. Yeah, not at the same level. Okay, these are going to segue really well, a really good transition into our discussion of difficult conversations, because all of these feelings that you are experiencing and the other person might be experiencing, right? How to notice what we are feeling um, in those moments so that we can uh, come to a better resolution, that we can move forward so the conversation doesn't feel like it needs to end there. So you used a joke as a way to break the ice, but it was taken as disrespect. Yeah, thank you for that example. Sometimes, yeah, where uh, what's seen as something that, in one culture we might do as a way to become more comfortable is actually disrespectful. Thank you for sharing that. That's a challenging situation, especially to start the conversation in that way. Yeah. Okay, thank you all for these really wonderful reflections. So sit with this as we move forward into talking about what makes a conversation difficult. We will return to these emotions very soon, but this is a great, great starting point. So yeah, those moments of friction that you're describing, this, feeling misunderstood, feeling undermined, that's exactly what we're exploring. So, cultural differences are one reason why conversations become challenging, but they're not the only factor. When we look at difficult conversations, we often find there's something significant at stake. It could be the outcome of the discussion, the relationship between the people, or even your own sense of identity or values. Typically, emotions are heightened. There are perhaps opposing views, and something important often feels at risk. Most difficult conversations involve one or more of these things happening at the same time. And these factors are what make this conversation so difficult to navigate. So, as we move through today's content, I want to kind of ground our discussion in some of the real challenges that you are facing in your work. So, to do this, I will present these three different possible scenarios, all set within the same broader context. So, our scenario being you are supporting a new maternal health program where there have been delays, miscommunications, and the community is starting to lose trust. So these three different situations, one with patient, the next with a staff member, and a third with community leader. While this specific scenario might not apply to you, often many of you will be navigating difficult conversations with these different groups of people. So keep that in mind as we go through this. So the first situation we will talk about, you're speaking with a community member who has heard negative things about the program. They are skeptical about participating. They might say something like, I heard the clinic ran out of supplies last time we ran this program. So why should I trust you and trust this program? Our second scenario is you've noticed a colleague is not following the agreed process for registering new patients. Steps are being skipped, and it's affecting the quality of care. So when you bring this up, they get defensive. In our third scenario, a local elder confronts you after a community meeting. He feels the program was designed without consulting the community. He might say something like, nobody asked us what we needed. You come here telling us what to do, but you don't really understand our community. So I'm going to tell people maybe not to get involved. So these are three very different conversations because they're different relationships, there are different power dynamics, different stakes, and each one of these will bring different challenges and nuances. And I see this question in the chat of what to do with the staff. So we will go through, hopefully by the end of this, you will have a few different skills and tools to be able to navigate all three of these different conversations. So before we dive into those tools for navigating those moments, I want to give you a framework for understanding what is actually happening beneath the surface of these conversations as they get difficult. That's where we're headed next. But first, take a moment to think, which one of these dynamics do you encounter most? So please share into the chat. In other words, do you experience difficult conversations most with patients, staff, or community leaders? Just to give me a sense of what are the types of conversations you all are having. The third one, okay, so difficult conversations with community leaders. Patients and staff. Okay, it looks like a little bit of everything so far, but please share in the chat what the types of conversations that you are having and that are top of mind for you today. So every difficult conversation actually has three different conversations happening at once, each at a different level of depth. We can think about this kind of like an iceberg. So at the top of our iceberg, that piece above the waterline, this is the what is happening or what happened conversation. This is the level of observable facts, the story of what occurred or what happened for each person and from their perspective. It's the part that we are most aware of, and it's oftentimes the easiest to talk about. But often there's a lot more going on beneath the surface. So the next level down is the feelings conversation. This is the emotional undercurrent of the exchange. So it's what we're feeling, but maybe not what we're saying out loud. It will shape how we interpret what happened and how we react to it. And then even deeper, at the base of the iceberg, is this identity conversation. This is where the situation touches on deeply held beliefs about who we are as individuals. This conversation is often happening entirely within ourselves, but it drives our reactions powerfully. And we might not always be conscious or aware of this conversation or what is happening at this identity level. And conflict often arises from a discrepancy or a difference between these levels. So what is being said on the surface or feels like an obvious of what is happening might not match what is being felt underneath. And then what is being felt is sometimes rooted in something even deeper about our identity. So if you can resolve a misunderstanding or a conflict at the what happened level, great, stay there, have that discussion of what happened and move forward. But if both of you have shared your stories and something still feels a bit off, it's probably time to take the conversation a level deeper, get to understand the feelings that are driving the experience, and perhaps what is at stake for each person's sense of self in the conflict. In the next few slides, we're going to look at each of these levels in more detail and explore how they might play out in the three scenarios we just discussed. Feel free to write in any questions into the chat, and I will try to get to them as we go along and as I give more detail on each of these slides. And maybe Esther can help respond to sharing details over WhatsApp. And if there is a way to do that, or
Yeah.
if there is a way, awesome.
Yeah, for if the participants here have a question for Elise, you can send them to me and I will make sure that she gets them. Um, also, you can go ahead and write those questions in the chat, and we can also do a little round of questions and provide the answers to you in a document. I'm going to take one quick moment to speak to our French speakers, okay? Alors, désolé, la personne qui va faire l'interprétation n'arrive pas, mais comme vous voyez dans les chats, je mets les traductions de la diapositive pour que vous puissiez entendre qu'est-ce que c'est que Elise parle. Et si vous avez questions sur cette traduction ou des questions pour Elise, bien que vous lisez les contenus, on peut vraiment, je peux faire poser cette question pour eux. Elle peut répondre et moi, je peux traduire la réponse d'Élise, mais je ne suis pas versée sur l'interprétation en direct. Et c'est pour ça que je ne m'offre pas pour faire l'interprétation en direct. Mais si vous avez des questions, vous pouvez les poser et moi, je peux les traduire pour vous. Et en même temps, s'il vous plaît, continuez à faire votre commentaire sur les chats pour que moi, je puisse vous aider. Comme je viens de dire, l'interprétation maintenant n'était pas en fonction. Merci. Thank you, Elise, for allowing me that little break.
Thank you. Okay, so we will dive into the three levels. So starting with the top of the iceberg, the what happened conversation. So this level focuses on those observable facts, the events, what was said or done. But here's the thing, that even when we're talking about the same situation, we often have very different perspectives on what actually happened. We notice different things, we remember different details, we're going to make different assumptions about why things were said and done. So in a difficult conversation, it's tempting to want to argue about what really happened or try to prove that our version of the story or the events is the right one. But the reality is there are usually multiple versions of the same event, and each one holds a piece of truth or our own truth in that. So the key in this conversation and at this level is not to convince the other person that you are right, but rather to be genuinely curious about their perspective. So maybe we want to ask, what did you see that I didn't? What am I missing here? So let's think about our scenarios. With the community member who is skeptical about the program, what might her version of what happened be so far? What with the colleague who is defensive about the registration process? What is their understanding of the situation? When you find yourself in a disagreement at this level, try, shifting from that, certainty of knowing what happened to that curiosity of trying to understand the other's perspective. Use I statements. Share your perspective without blame. I understood our plan to be this, and then invite their perspective. What's your understanding? Again, the goal here is to piece together a more full picture of the situation. The next level is the feelings conversation. So this is the emotional layer beneath the surface of what is being said. In a difficult conversation, emotions are always present, even when they're not being named directly. They shape how we interpret what is happening, how we react, and how we express ourselves. But often we try to avoid talking about feelings, especially in professional contexts. We might worry that acknowledging emotions will make the conversation even more difficult or more personal than perhaps we want it. But the problem is that when feelings are unspoken, they don't go away. They might appear through our tone or our body language or the words that we choose to use. So they can make our conversation feel tense, as some of you mentioned earlier, or charged, even when both people are talking about the facts of what happened. The emotional feeling and undercurrent sometimes is still there. So as we think about our scenarios with the community member, what feelings might be beneath her skepticism? Maybe it's this distrust, fear, or disappointment. With the defensive colleague, what emotions are driving their reaction? Maybe stress, shame, feeling attacked. The key at this level, in the feelings level, is to notice and name those emotions, both your own emotions and the other person's. And in naming the other person's emotions, we don't have to agree with what they are feeling, but we do have to acknowledge what we're seeing and what they're feeling. A simple, it sounds like this has been really frustrating, or I can hear how much this matters to you. This can go a long way. So remember, but yeah, just remember that naming a feeling is not the same as agreeing with it. It's really about recognizing the emotional reality of the situation. That way you can address what is going on at that level, not just what is being said, but what is being felt. And then the next level down, the identity conversation or the identity level. This is the conversation or the level that is happening within ourselves about what that situation means for who we are. We don't walk into difficult conversations as an open book or a blank slate. We all hold complex perspectives and opinions and experiences, and those are deeply tied to our sense of self. And when those beliefs and values are challenged, it can feel like a threat to our identity. And this is often what makes a conversation feel really personal. So even when it appears to be about something else entirely, it's not just the facts are at stake, but really the very sense of who we are. So thinking about our community leader scenario, when he says, you don't understand our community, he might be feeling that his own standing and influence is being undermined. Or maybe his identity as a leader might be at stake in this situation. Or consider the defensiveness of our colleague, with the other staff scenario. They might be feeling that the conversation is calling into question their own competence or their value to the team. Their identity as a good worker is on the line in this scenario. And this level is often the most hidden, but it's also the most powerful. It's it's at this layer that is often driving those intense emotions that are appearing in a difficult conversation. And it's often the one that's talked about the least because it requires a really high level of trust and safety in order to get to those underlying identity and beliefs. So, really, we want to be mentally prepared for going into discussing at this level, even when it's not apparent or being named. We want to ask ourselves, what might be feeling threatened here for me? And what might the other person feel is at stake for them? Just creating this awareness at this level can help you navigate this difficult conversation more effectively. It can open up empathy for others and their experience and their reaction, even if we disagree with their perspective. So then, knowing these three levels, what actually drives the conflict? So taking that step back, let's look at how these three conversations or these three levels, the what happened, the feelings, and the identity, they are driving conflict when they are misaligned. So let's consider our scenario with the staff member, the colleague who isn't following our agreed process for registering new patients. So at the what happened level, the conflict might seem really straightforward. The process isn't being followed, and that needs to be addressed. So maybe you come into the conversation thinking the conflict is at the what happens level. So you discuss it at that level, you clarify the process, you agree on how to move forward, and maybe the conflict is resolved easily. But remember, maybe you tried to address it and they became defensive. Maybe they said, I'm doing the best I can. Why is this suddenly my fault? So this reaction might suggest that for your colleague, this conflict is not only about the process. It's not only about what happened on the surface. So here we might see a misalignment between the levels. So maybe you come in, you're focused on the what happened. Your colleague is not following the agreed on process. And then your colleague is actually reacting at this feelings level. Maybe they're feeling blamed or unappreciated. Or maybe at the identity level, they feel their competence or their value to the team is being questioned. So if you try to resolve this only at the what happened level, you might, clarify the process, but the underlying feeling that could still remain unaddressed. And it could cause the conflict to continue or resurface later in other ways. So this is really why it's so important to be aware of all of these levels and how they appear in difficult conversations. If a conflict seems to continue even after you think you've reached an agreement, try asking, if you're experiencing this at the same level, or is one person reacting to something deeper? Really, the power of this framework is that it helps us understand where those misalignments are happening. So if you can identify where that disconnect happens, you can then steer the conversation in a more productive direction. So in this example, you might acknowledge your colleague's feelings, even as you clarify the process. So maybe you look for ways to affirm their competence and value their contribution as part of the team, even as you're working to resolve some of the process challenges that originally drove the conflict. So again, the goal here, we want to bring these conversations and these levels into alignment and create a space where others are feeling heard and understood. This will allow you to address the real drivers of the conflict and allow you to have kind of resolution as well. So I want to pause here for a moment and see if there are any questions with this framework, with this scenario, as I know it's quite complex.
Does anyone want to share any experience that you may have had navigating this type of scenario, or have any questions about what Elise just presented and the conversations? You can come off mute if you want, or write it in the chat. We'll give you a couple of seconds. Yes, Sister Brigitta, how are you?
How are you? Thank you so much. I think for very interesting inputs.
Can you maybe get closer to your microphone because I cannot.
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. This is a very informative and eye-opening conversation. I think I'm one person who has forever avoided conflict. But again, when people have to live together, conflict has to be there. And sometimes maybe we really don't want to understand that maybe the other person has a different view from me. But looking at what you have brought out today, very simple things, but like wanting to understand what has happened, how I'm feeling, and then how is my identity being affected is very important in dealing with conflict instead of avoiding them, especially for people like me who avoid conflict. And so I'm looking at why maybe I avoid it, because probably I look at what happened and the feelings. I have mixed feelings and I don't want to address it. But thank you also, because I'm looking at sometimes it's an issue also of communication, maybe how I'm looking at one situation, another person across a different culture, and culture could be maybe from a different family or a different, in Africa, we talk about tribes or countries, or yes. So thank you so much for what you are bringing out. It's really helping also shape the way I look at conflict myself. Thank you.
Wonderful. I'm very happy to hear that. And, this slide in particular is intended to demonstrate that there are two people, right? I think your comment does a nice job of explaining this, that there's, we both are having these different levels occurring within us, right? So maybe if you feel like you are avoiding the conflict for, what are the feelings happening for you? What about your identity are you might be at stake in wanting to avoid this conflict, as well as with the other person, right? So it's a combination of recognizing what is happening within ourselves and also the other person. Yeah, please. Oh, Esther, you're muted.
We'll take Sister Jane's question and then we will move on to the next slides. And I will update you in what's going on in the chat. Sister Jane, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elise. As I have already put it in the chat, we really need your contact because this is our daily bread. We can't avoid conflict. And some of us, as my sister has said, Samba has said, we tend to avoid because we don't want to hurt other people. We stay in with emotions and we can't really speak it up. You don't want to hurt other people. You want to keep good communication with people, but you die inside. You die. You don't want to hurt people. So confrontation is very difficult for me. Like, let's sit and we discuss this. I see it as it might bring more conflict. So I decided to keep quiet and pray over it. That with time it will be resolved. So this is very, very important topic. And I'm grateful, and I think even other participants are also grateful, because this is our daily bread. This is what we experience every day. Thank you so much for this presentation.
Thank you. And this is a really also wonderful point as well. What you're saying is, or what I'm hearing you say, I don't want to hurt others, right? You want to create space for others. And part of navigating difficult conversations can also be about creating space for healing for the other person. How powerful it can be when you're having this conversation, to talk about what happened, and then say to somebody, wow, this is a really frustrating experience for you. Or, wow, you must be really scared, right? Naming that emotion, using our active listening skills that we talked about last week, might bring some comfort. And so on the surface, it might feel like we're going into a difficult conversation. We want to avoid conflict. We want to be really careful. But actually, there can be a lot of power in making the other person or feel heard and understood. And so, in some ways, we don't want to hurt them, but by addressing the conflict so that it doesn't carry on and persist and maybe get worse, we can bring it to the surface and address it and create a space where people feel that understanding. Okay, so I will, if there are any questions in the chat, Esther, feel free to call my attention to, but if not, we will move forward. Okay, I see you nodding. Wonderful. Okay, so we will transition. So as we transition then into talking about conflict resolution, I want to quickly share this graph known as the crisis curve. It illustrates how conflicts tend to escalate and then de-escalate over time or in a conversation. So as you can see, conflict doesn't happen all at once. It's not going from zero to you're in the middle of a conflict. It actually builds and then it reaches this peak and then settles. And there are often triggers and there are opportunities as the conflict is building to interrupt and intervene and address it before it feels like you're in the peak of conflict and things are challenging and you don't know where to go. So yeah, in these earlier stages, we have opportunities to prevent that escalation. That is where your active listening techniques that we practiced in session 2 can be really valuable. So then as we move up the curve and emotions are running higher, we want to start shifting our focus to de-escalation. We'll discuss some strategies and for these really high tense moments in a bit. But then, after the peak of conflict, there's then this opportunity for repair and rebuilding trust. And again, those communication skills that we've been developing, those will again be really important here. So we won't have a lot of time to dive into the details of each stage of this curve. And as Esther shared, we will send around a resource guide after the session. It goes into a lot of detail in the crisis curve and what you can do at each level. Baseline, triggers, agitation, acceleration, what you can do to intervene and address the conflict in those moments. But I share this now just to say that conflict doesn't happen all at once, and thinking about it as a slow progression and different multiple points that you can intervene can be helpful. So then let's actually look at some of those specific techniques that you can use in the moment. So when you're at the peak of that crisis curve, emotions are running high we need strategies to de-escalate the situation. One powerful tool and way to do this is the CALM framework. CALM stands for connect, acknowledge, listen, and then motivate collaboration or move forward together. So looking at each of these in a little more detail. The first step, connect. So this is about building rapport. You want to show the other person that you care, that you understand. You can do this by saying their name, making eye contact if it's culturally appropriate, expressing that genuine concern. For example, maybe you say something like, I can see this is really important to you. I want to understand more. And then open the space. The second step, acknowledge. This is about validating the other person's feelings. You don't have to necessarily agree with their behavior or even their feeling, but just to validate that they are experiencing it. Maybe saying, I can hear how frustrated you are, or this is a challenging situation. So acknowledging those emotions can help the other person feel heard and understood. And then listen. This is, again, where those active listening skills that we were practicing and discussing from session 2, that's where these come into play. Give the other person your full attention. Don't interrupt. Allow them to express their feelings fully, or show that you're listening by reflecting back their feelings. Reflect back what you heard, mirror what they heard, ask clarifying questions. And then the final step, motivate collaboration. This is about partnering together to find a solution. Don't focus on who is to blame or who's right, but instead shift the conversation towards choices and next steps. You might ask, what can we do to make this better? Or how can we move forward from here? And remember, the goal of CALM is not to win an argument or prove a point, but really to de-escalate a stressful situation. We need to maintain respectful boundaries and find a way to work together towards a resolution. So let's practice by applying CALM to the scenario with the skeptical patient. So again, this, as we remember, this is this community member who heard negative things about the program. Maybe they're hesitant to participate. So you hear them say, I heard the clinic ran out of supplies last time. Why should I trust the program? So imagine you are the one having this conversation. So first, connect. Feel free to write into the chat as we go along, or come on mic, but how could you build rapport and show you care in this situation? What might you do? So again, you're talking to this skeptical patient, and they're not sure if they want to engage in the program. How would you build rapport with them?
Does anyone want to share? Does this seem like something that you can apply to your own workplace or your context? That because not only do we want you to reflect on how have you encountered this in the past, but also this type of techniques, how can you apply them or implement them in your work context moving forward? Not only is this about a self-assessment of what you've done before, but we also want to provide you, as you've shared, the techniques that you need in order to better engage with your community. So think, take a moment and think about how can you apply this calm technique to your work context. Yes, Ashley?
So good morning, everyone. So I'm so excited for joining this webinar. It is really an important subject, and as I am the operation director for AT Community, so I am facing those kind of situation, I can say maybe every day in my work. So the important thing that we need to do, it is to get calm, because when you are under pressure or under emotion, you cannot handle those kind of situations. So I can say that I am in a situation. I have one employee, uh, so he does something wrong, and there are some punishment when you do something wrong. What they see, what the consequence that you are going to face, and those things will help us to handle those situations, because the other person has already known about them. If he does something, he knows what consequence that can happen. And this is one. But the calm, it is when you are going to face a situation that happens suddenly. You see, you need to keep your calm. You need to have your calm in order to handle that situation. So I have one employee. Sometimes he come to work, sometimes he doesn't want to work. He can come 3 days for the week, and he doesn't come for the other days, and he doesn't notice his absence. You see? And sometimes this person can make you angry, can make you, I can say, emotionally do something, and after you are going to reflect and you say, I didn't want to do that. You see, but having your calm, that will help you to handle this. So I don't talk to that employee yet, but I take my calm in order to see how I am going to handle that with him. If maybe he has another thing that he is doing and that prevent him coming to work, maybe those days, you see. So I'm going to sit with him in order to talk, to know what is exactly the problem, what is preventing him to come to work in those days. And after that, I am going to listen him. And after that, we're going to take a decision together. If he can only come to work 3 days, I can handle that and give him 3 days for working in order to church another person to fill that others day that he cannot come to work. So sometimes I can feel upset about the situation, because I know this person, it is an adult. He knows his work. He knows how to handle his work. When he cannot come to work, he knows that he can notice that he cannot come to work, but he doesn't do that. That can make me angry or upset, but I keep my calm in order to handle that situation with him. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for this example. That is a great example to apply this calm technique, right? So if you went into the conversation with, you're not showing up to work, I need you to do this. He might get defensive, right? He's not going to listen to what you say. But if you start with connecting, maybe you welcome him in, you build that rapport of the importance of the work, or things that you have that common understanding of what you care about, your shared goal, that you both are here to do the work together and to accomplish this. Explore why they might be showing up late, or why they're not showing up at all. What's happening in their world, acknowledging that, and then you can get to that this is frustrating, right? That you're, we're not showing up, we need you here. You can get to that harder conversation after you are able to connect and acknowledge their experience. So that's a really great example. And then working together, motivating collaboration, moving forward. So thank you for sharing that example.
We have some great reflections on the chat, but because of time, let's just listen to Sister Judith and then move on to the next slide. So Sister Judith, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Elise, for this wonderful program. What, in my experience working in the community, how I've used these techniques will be like connecting, will be like somebody, the scenario that you have given us, I will say, I have heard that you are not happy with what is going on, but I will invite the person to the program and say, why can't you come and just listen and then decide on your own than hearing from other people? So when the person comes and experience at the first hand themselves, and acknowledging, I will use it in a way that I will say, I know when you are.
Sorry, Sister Judith, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry about that. So when you have a new program in the community, sometimes it's threatening, and I can feel your fear, so that you put them at peace within themselves. And then I'll listen to their anxiety. Why do they feel the program is like this? So that they explained in their own way. And then collaboration, what I'll do will be like, when I listen to them, I invite them to participate, maybe to use that program. Maybe if it's a program that is, let's say, a cooking demonstrations, maybe we use their home and do the demonstrations at their home. And for that myself, I will say that's how I will do the escalation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another great example of where we can use this technique. So I welcome you to continue sharing your experiences in the chat or ask any questions. Before we wrap up today, though, I want to share one more technique that you all can apply immediately when we leave here today. So in addition to calm, which helps us de-escalate those difficult conversations, it also is important to have a tool for managing our own emotions in these high stress situations. So that is where the STOP technique can be really helpful. STOP stands for S, meaning stop. The T stands for take a breath. O, observe, and P, proceed. So the first step, stop. This is about creating a moment of choice between the stimulus, what happened, and the response. So when we're in a heated conversation, our instinct might be to react immediately, but pausing, even for a second, can make a big difference. The second step, take a breath. This is a physical cue to our body to calm down, to slow down. In a single deep breath, this can interrupt the stress response and just give you a moment of clarity. The third step, observe. This is where you check in with yourself. What emotions are you experiencing? Where do you feel this in your body? Just naming your feelings can help you gain some distance from them. And then the final step, proceed. This is about choosing your response intentionally. Instead of reacting automatically, you get to decide how you want to move forward in a way that aligns with your goals and values. So you can use this tool, STOP, anytime, anywhere. It doesn't require a lot of time. And even in the middle of a difficult conversation, just practice STOP internally. Pause, take a deep breath, observe what's going on, and then move forward. And really, as with all of these tools, last week, Calm, the key here is to practice. And practice regularly, not only in those high stress moments. So the more that you can practice and check in with yourself, the easier it becomes to apply it in that challenging or difficult conversation. And then remember that managing your own emotions is just as important as de-escalating the other person or helping to manage the other person's emotions and experiences. And STOP, hopefully is a powerful tool that allows you to do that. And so with a few more minutes, I want to give you a chance to practice one of these steps. So let's do a quick body scan practice. So the body is giving us these signals that we are experiencing stress before our mind can even catch up and register, especially when we are in those difficult conversations. So you might notice that you have your eyebrows are bunched or your shoulders are hunched. You might have clenched fists or a tight chest. Some of those nonverbal cues that we talked about last session. So maybe you find your breathing shallow or crossing your arms. So noticing what is happening is a skill that, again, takes practice and self-reflection. So let's do a quick body scan. I want you to think again to a difficult conversation you've had recently. This could be, if you can't think of something in your personal life, think about one of the scenarios and something that you might experience in your own life. If you're comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes and take a deep breath. So as you hold that conversation in your mind, start to scan your body from head to toe. Where do you feel the tension or discomfort? Is it in your face, your shoulders, your chest, your hands? What changes do you notice in your breathing and posture? Just observe what is happening. There's no judgment. We're not trying to change anything. We're just bringing awareness to what is already there and what is happening. And ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? See if you can name that emotion. Is it anxiety, frustration, anger? Again, observing, acknowledging without judgment. Now take another deep breath, and if your eyes were closed, I invite you to gently open your eyes. So this practice of naming our emotions can be really powerful, and recognizing what is happening in our body. When you identify what is happening, we can then use that information. If your voice changes, thanks for that example. Feel it in your shoulders, So when we notice what's happening, we can change it, right? If your arms are crossed, you can try uncrossing your arms. If you feel your temperature rising, maybe take a sip of water, or consciously think about relaxing your shoulders or relaxing your facial muscles. So these small physical changes can then send a signal of safety to your brain and help you calm and slow down your stress response. So in a real conversation, you might even name your emotion out loud. For example, you could say, I'm noticing I'm feeling quite anxious about this. See how the other person responds. They might feel comfort in that vulnerability and honesty and create a moment of connection. And so remember that this body scan check-in is really a practical tool to use in the moment, in the middle of a difficult conversation. And the more you practice, the easier it becomes to notice and regulate your own responses. Yeah, and if your blood pressure rising too, so it's good for your health to slow down and to try to calm those stress responses. Yeah. And so before we wrap up, I want to kind of leave you with this main point and a slide that we won't go into, but you will have lots of resources on later. But the key here is that conflict resolution is about making the other person feel heard and understood. And if you don't feel like you can do that, keep listening. This is the key idea we want to emphasize as we navigate difficult conversations. It's not about winning an argument or proving a point. We want to genuinely understand what the other person's perspective is, help them feel heard, and move forward from there. Some of you started talking about and hinting at how you appear and how you navigate conflict. As we've seen throughout this session, that conflict is truly just a natural part of our human interactions. And we all have different patterns or styles that we gravitate towards when responding to a conflict. You will have access to these slides and a much more detailed resource guide that breaks down each of these conflict styles, as well as questions for your own reflection on your patterns and how you show up. And there are a lot of different schools of thought, but generally, no one style is inherently right or wrong. Each can be appropriate depending on the situation or the stakes or the relationship. And again, as with the theme of today, the key is to be aware of your own tendencies or your own patterns and choose your approach deliberately. So I encourage you, after the session, review the material and think about what style you tend to default to. Does it change depending on who you're interacting with and how you might adapt your approach to be more effective in different situations? And lastly, understanding your own conflict style is really a powerful step in navigating those difficult conversations more skillfully. So as you move forward, keep this framework in mind and refer back to the resource guide as needed. But as we come to the end of our time together, just want to leave you with a few key points and action steps. So first, remember that calm and stop techniques are powerful tools you can use anytime, anywhere. And before our next session, I encourage you try using them, practice them, notice how you feel and how the conversation changes when you apply these tools. And then second, take a look at the resource guide. There's a lot of great information there that goes into a lot more information than what we were able to discuss today. Next week, we will focus on advocacy for community impact. We'll explore how to use the communication and the conflict resolution skills that we've been developing to drive forward positive change in your communities. So thank you all for your engagement and participation today. Your insights and questions and experiences have really enriched our time together. So I invite you to share a takeaway from today's session in the chat. But I will pause here for questions and turn it back over to Esther as well for any closing.
Thank you. Thank you, Elise, for your wonderful presentation. As you can see on the chat, people are starting to clap, to react, to say thank you. We have Fidelia who says that one takeaway for her is to be genuinely curious in trying to understand the other person's perspective. And that's the key to active listening as well, is to understanding where the other person is coming from. I always say, meet the person where they are at in order to better understand. Elise, if you could stop sharing so that we can maybe take a picture of everyone who wants to come on camera and take a picture with us, that would be great so that we can record your presence here. I am starting to set up so I'll allow a couple of seconds because I know different networks come up differently. It's great to see your faces online. As Elise said, next week we will have our last event for the Leadership in Practice series. So we expect to see you all here. Et pour les personnes francophones, je vous assure que la semaine prochaine, on aura l'interprétation qui marche bien. Je vais faire la traduction, les transcripts et je vais les partager avec vous dans l'après-midi pour moi. Et merci de rester là toute la journée, tout l'événement, bien qu'il n'y ait pas d'interprétation. Okay, so we're gonna do this in 1, 2 big smiles, and 3. Let me see if we have more people. Yes, we do. One more, and here we go. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming up on your camera. We appreciate it. Thank you, Elise, for an excellent presentation. And we hope that you will join us in our final session next Tuesday, August 4th. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day. I will send the recording in a couple of hours. So thank you so much. We also have, as I told you, a couple of extra resources. So be on the lookout for all of that. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.